Hey, thanks for stopping by. In this episode of my Roblox GUI tutorial guide, we're going to be going over text buttons. So in my last video, we went over text labels and getting to know a little bit more about GUI properties, and in this episode, we're pretty much going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to introduce you to text buttons, and then we're also going to be looking at more GUI properties, and we'll be adding scripts to these buttons to be able to make them functional inside of our Roblox games. So first things first, what is a text button? It's basically like a text label, except you can interact with it by clicking on it. That's like the easiest way I can describe it. So you know how with text labels, we were able to show them up on our screen, and we were able to change the text that was on those text labels and modify them through script. But all we were able to do was just look at them. There was no interactive part to those text labels, but now, what if we had a text label, except we can actually interact with it by pressing on it? That's where text buttons come in. So the way we're going to create a text button is the same way we created a text label. We're going to first add in a screen GUI, so on the right side, I'm going to say this again, we need to have a screen GUI in order to actually display our GUI elements. That's the only way we're going to be able to do it. So make sure you have a screen GUI and start a GUI. I called it main GUI. And let's click on the plus sign. So we're going to add in a text button, which is down here. And as you can see, just like with text labels, it's shown on our screen. But there are two differences to this button. So the text says button instead of label, and we're able to hover over this button as well. So as you can see, when we hover over the button, then the color of the button goes a little darker to represent a button so that we're able to click on it. So same thing with text labels, we can move this around on our screen, we can even change the size of the button as well, so nothing new there. And most of the properties here are very identical to text labels, so that's one good thing about this is that a lot of the properties are transferable. But now what we'll do is we'll go over more GUI properties that I haven't covered yet in this tutorial guide. So the first property that's unique to text buttons is this property here called AutoButtonColor. Basically what this does is, you know how you can select this button and it changes the color of the button whenever you hover over it. Roblox does this by default because this is an easy way for us to recognize this as a button rather than a text label. But if we unselect it, then we won't be able to hover over this button to not make it seem like we can press this button. If we turn it back on, then we're able to make it look like we can press this. Now you can do this manually through scripting, but that's like a lot of boilerplate code that's very redundant because you're going to have to do this for every single text button, which is why Roblox provided a simple check mark on whether you want this property to be enabled or not. The rest of the properties in this episode will actually dive deeper into the text category, and the first thing I'll show you is this text right here that says TextScaled. So in my last episode, I went over TextSize, which is basically the size of the text that's inside of our GUI element. So with this little tiny text that says button, we can change the text size to something a lot bigger so that we can actually see it. Now, there are a couple issues with this text size property. If we change the size of this button, then it's not going to change the size of the text alongside with it. So that's definitely an issue. So what if we wanted to make it so that Roblox will automatically scale the button's text size along with the size of the text button? We can do that with a property called TextScaled. So if we select this, you might have noticed that nothing has changed, but if we scale this down, we can see that Roblox is automatically scaling the text as we scale down this text button. So this is one of the most useful GUI properties that I've ever worked with when making GUI elements. And for most GUIs that you create, I highly recommend turning on this text scaled option. But you might ask, if we have text scaled on, then what happened to text size? Well, text size is basically useless if we have text scale turned on, because if we try changing the text size to something different now that we have text scale turned on, like 100 for instance, you can see that the size of the text did not change at all. But if we turn off text scaled really quickly, we can see that now we see the effects of text size. But if we turn on text scaled again, it'll just go back to what Roblox automatically scaled it to based on the size of the button. So like I mentioned, most of the time you should have text scaled on rather than use text size because text size is very limited and you definitely have to be very precise when you're using TextSize compared to TextScaled. It just saves a bunch of headache, which is why I suggest using TextScaled. Unless for specific situations where you want to have a small button, but then you want to have the text size be a very specific size, like maybe something that's a little bit smaller than this, or maybe something that's a little bit bigger than the text button. So it's for like very precise scenarios if you choose to, but most of the time I have text scale turned on rather than using the text size property. So the next property we have is TextWrapped. So let's just disable text scaled really quickly so that I can show you how this example works. And let's make the text size something smaller so that it fits the box, like 54. So TextWrapped is basically saying, how do we want to handle the text whenever we have a size that's smaller than the text itself? So if we scale this down, we can see that Roblox is putting the text that used to be on the right side here down to the next line because it's not going to fit in the first line. So instead of just making it go off screen, it just simply puts it down here. So that's essentially what TextWrapped is. But if you have TextScaled turned on, then you won't find any use with TextWrapped because Roblox just automatically scales the button down. And the same thing can be said for this next property called TextTruncate. This is a very specific property that I don't use at all, but if you want to know about this property, but I think it's still pretty good to know about in case you do want to use it. So TextTruncate is similar to TextWrapped, except this handles off-screen text differently than TextWrapped. Instead of having the text drop the next line, instead what Roblox is going to do is that it's just going to hide the text that's not showing on the button, but instead replacing it with a bunch of dots to show that there is more to the text. So what I mean is, if we go on the right here and we click the drop down, we can see that there's an option that says at end. If we press this and we disable TextWrapped and we scale this down, we can see that Roblox has added three dots over here, letting us know that there is more text to be seen if we scale this button back up. Again, it's very specific. I think it's still pretty good to know, but in case you ever want to use this, but I personally never use this. So take it for what you will. And then the last two text properties we'll go over in this episode is TextXAllignment and TextYAllignment. So let's just scale this back up again really quick and let's center this to the center of the screen. So TextX and TextYAllignment are basically two properties that tell us where do we want the text to be aligned on this text button. So right now it's in the very center of the button, but if we change one of these properties, so let's say TextXAllignment to left, then it's going to go to the left side of the button. And if I change the text to add like more stuff to it, then it's just going to start from the left and then it'll keep adding to the right. Now, let's make the same thing happen, but this time on the right side. So if we make this on the right side, it'll show up like this. And then if we add a bunch of stuff, then it'll still stay on the right side. And the same thing can be done with TextYAllignment. So we can, let's put this back on the center and we can change our Y alignment to bottom and top. So top will make the button's text go on the top and bottom will make the text go on the bottom. So pretty self-explanatory stuff. I think you'll find great use for this when you want to put the text somewhere specific in your GUI elements. And so that's also something important to know about. All right, now let's get into the scripting component of this button. So let's just quickly change text scaled back to true so that we can see the text fully without having to manually change the text size. So there's 4 events I want to introduce to you, starting with the first one. So first thing we'll do is we'll go on the right side. Inside of main GUI, we're going to hit the plus sign and we're going to add in a local script. So let's delete this and let's first make reference to our GUI. So we're going to say local GUI equals script.parent, and then we're going to make reference to our text button by saying local button equals GUI.button, or text button, I mean. And the first event I will introduce to you is mouse hover. So when we look at our button, we can see that when we hover over the button, the color of the frame changes when we hover over it. That indicates that the player's mouse is currently being hovered over it. So we want to catch that and do whatever we want it to do when we hover over this button. And we can do this using a event called mouse enter. So we will do that by saying button.mouse enter connect function, and then we're going to drop a line down here, and then we're going to say print player has entered in the button. And so when we go into the game, hit test and hit play, then what should happen is that when our player mouse hovers over this button, then we should see the print statement down below. So if we hover over this, then it will print one time in the output saying player has entered in the button. If we hover over it again, then it'll print it again. There's basically another event that complements this called mouse leave. So this is basically when the player enters in their mouse, but then leaves the button after they've entered in. So we can do that by saying, dropping 2 lines down here, by saying button.mouseLeave connect function, open parentheses, close parentheses. And then we can do the same thing here by saying player has left the button. And so this will pretty much fire whenever the player leaves the button after entering into the button. So mouse leave cannot be fired until mouse enter fires first. All right, and so now there's 2 more events that I want to introduce to you. So now let's make an event that happens when we actually click on the button. And there's 2 ways of doing this. So we're going to do that with our left mouse button, or if you're tapping it on the iPad, or if you're using right trigger on Xbox, or even on PlayStation as well. So we're going to do that using an event called mouse button one click. So this is what it will look like. Let's drop 2 lines down here. We're going to say button.mouse button one click connect function, open parentheses, close parentheses. And so this is basically going to fire whenever we click on the button. But clicking can also refer to tapping on the button or using right trigger on the button. So we will say print button has been activated. So let's go into the game, hit test and hit play. And so there should be 3 things happening with this button. So first thing is entering into the button. Entering into the button, letting go of the button. So just like going off screen from the button, it'll print both player has entered the button and also player has left the button. If we also click on it, we can see that button has been activated. So that seems to work out pretty well as well. So I'm on PC, and this is only running when I'm using the left mouse button and not the right mouse. If I try clicking on my right mouse, it's not going to activate because mouse button one click is specifically for the left mouse button. But if we want to do it for the right mouse button, we would use an event called mouse button two click. So we can just copy this by selecting this and controlling Z, and then dropping 2 lines and hitting Control V for pasting. And we can change mouse button one click to mouse button two click. So now we're going to print here by saying button has been right clicked, and we could just get rid of this activated part. So this is going to happen when we right click on the button. Now we have 2 cases of when we left click on it, and when we right click on it, it'll print 2 different things. Now, you kind of have to be careful with mouse button two click because I'm pretty sure mouse button two click does not work on mobile, nor does it work on Xbox or PlayStation. This is only a PC exclusive event. That's why I generally prefer not using mouse button two click. But there may be certain circumstances if you're specifically playing a PC game on Roblox, you might use mouse button two click. We're mostly interested in mouse button one click because this is definitely used way more than mouse button two click. All right, but now let's do something fancy. I'm going to create a prompt for this button every time we press it through a table full of dialogue options that we can choose from. So how we're going to do that is we're going to go back to our local script, and we're going to make this happen every time we left mouse click the button. So first thing we'll do is we'll create a table full of prompts. So after we make reference to our button, let's drop 2 lines, and then we'll make a table. So we'll call this table phrases, and we're going to make this into a table with the open and closed curly brackets, and then we're going to drop a line so that we can write a phrase for each line to make it more readable. So these phrases are going to be strings because we're going to update the button's text whenever we press it. So let's make the first phrase something like, ow, that hurt, or something. And then we'll write a comma to make another phrase down here. So we're going to say, stop clicking on me. And then we can make another one, probably saying, don't do that. And then we could just make another one by saying, this makes me mad. And so you kind of get the idea. So these are going to be all our phrases that will potentially be said in our text. So now we need to figure out how we can pick a random phrase from this phrases table. So down here, after mouse button one click, we're first going to pick a random number from 1 to however many entries there are in this table, because we're trying to pick the index of whatever we're trying to fetch from this phrases table. So we'll say local random index equals math.random, and our minimum value is going to be 1 because the first entry will have a position of 1 and the last entry is at position 4. So we'll say math.random 1 to 4. Now there is another way of picking out our maximum value instead of hard coding the number 4, because we might add a 5th entry in the future or maybe even more entries. So what we can do instead is that we can fetch the number of entries that our table phrases have by saying the hashtag or pound symbol, and then the table. So our table is phrases. So this will return the number of entries from our phrases table, because this acts as the maximum position inside of our phrases. So basically the position of this one down here. So it's going to start at 1, which is up here, and then the last one, which is down here. So now we have our random index. Let's actually get that phrase. So we'll say local random phrase equals phrases. And then if you remember how indexing works, if you watched my beginner's tutorial guide, is that we do the hard brackets, the open and close hard brackets, and we put in our random index that we picked out. So this will essentially be our actual random phrase. So it can be this one, it can be this one, or even this one or this one. So now let's take that phrase and put that inside of the button's text. So down here, we're going to say button.text equals random phrase. All right, so now that we have that, let's test the game. All right, so I'm joined into the game. If we hover over the button, we should see that it's printed in the output. Now let's click on it. We can see that a random phrase was picked from our phrases table to then update the text here by saying, don't do that. If we click it again, it'll say, don't do that again. If we click it again or again, yeah, and then now it says something different. This makes me mad. And then we press it again. Don't do that. 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 And it would say, ow, that hurts. So it's basically just picking a random phrase and updating the text of this button to say whatever that random phrase is. So we could just keep on doing this and it'll just constantly pick a random text to update this text button. So I figured that was something pretty cool to add. All right, so for this last part of the video, I'm actually going to have you do a challenge, and this challenge will have a couple requirements that I want you to follow. Now, again, you can try this challenge on your own and then come back and see what I do, or you could just simply follow along what I do just to get the experience. So essentially what I want you to do is create a prompt right here that basically asks the question, do you like Roblox? And you could probably guess that this is going to be a text label. So I want you to create a text label that asks that question. And I want you to create 2 buttons that acts as a yes button and a no button. So you'll have one button that's associated with yes and then one that associates with no. And what I want you to do is when you click on one of them, I want you to change the text of the text label to something you think the text will say after picking the option. And I also want you to change the background color of the text label as well, based on the answer that you picked. So for instance, if you picked yes, then you can probably change the color to green. Or if you say no, then you can change the color to red or something. So let's get started on that. All right, so on the right side, let's first create a text label. Text label, and we're going to call this text label prompt label. Let's move this to the center a little bit and let's change the scale of it as well. And just to see the text better, let's go down here and press TextScaled. And let's change the text to the prompt, which was, do you like Roblox? ? And then let's create 2 buttons. So we'll make this our first button. So let's rename this to yes button, and let's duplicate it and call this one no button. And let's move the no button to the right side and let's move the yes button to the left side. So in order to differentiate between these buttons, I'm going to change the background color of both of these. So for the green one, let's make it green. And then for the no button, let's make the background color red. And let's also change the text for them as well. So this one's going to say no for the text, and this one is going to say yes for the text. It is kind of off-centered a little bit. I'm not very good with symmetry just by eyeballing it, so it's like it goes something like this. So now what we'll do is we'll go to our local script. Let's actually delete all this code right here, except for our mouse button one click, because we don't really need this anymore. So let's delete all this. Let's even delete all the code that's inside of our mouse button one click. And let's re-reference our yes and no buttons. So let's delete this, and we're going to reference both our yes and no button. So we'll say local yes button equals GUI.yes button. And down here, we'll say local no button equals GUI.no button. And then we'll also make reference to our prompt label. So we'll say local prompt equals GUI.prompt label. So now what we'll do is we'll create two mouse button one-click events for both yes and no buttons. So for this one, this is going to be for the yes button. Let's copy this, put it down here. And this one's going to be for the no button. And then what we'll do is we will first change the background color of the prompt. So we will say prompt.backgroundColor3 equals color3.fromRGB. And then let's pick a color that's associated with picking yes. So we'll probably pick a green color, and we can do that by selecting these parameters and then clicking this color wheel right here to pull up the panel. So we'll make it green, and then we will copy this and put it down here. And instead of it being green, let's change this to red for no. And so down here, let's change the text of the prompt by saying prompt.text equals maybe something like, yay, I'm glad you like Roblox as well. And then we could just like do a little something like that. And then we can pretty much just do the same thing down here with no by saying, "Aw, I'm sorry to hear that," or something like that. It seems a little basic, but I just want you to get the gist of these text buttons when we're using these events. So I think we're pretty much done. Let's just go to test and hit play and see our change. So we're loaded into the game. If I press yes, then the text label should change by saying, "Yay, I'm glad you like Roblox as well." And the background color of this text label changed to green. If we say no, then the background color changes to red, and the text changes by saying, "Aw, I'm sorry to hear that." And we can just kind of repeatedly do this over and over again. There isn't really anything too special happening with these text buttons or text labels. So that's pretty much all I wanted you to do for this challenge. It's pretty simple, but just getting a feel for these GUI elements, the more you practice them, I think will definitely help you when you try to implement more complicated GUI elements inside of your Roblox game. So that's pretty much going to be it for this episode. We uncovered quite a bit on this tutorial. In the next episode, I'm going to be covering over misconceptions with sizing and positioning, and also scaling and offset issues. So that one's definitely going to be a very valuable episode for you to tune into. So I'm looking forward to that. But in the meantime, I'm going to revert back to my advanced scripting tutorial guide so that I can make videos on that tutorial and make it alongside this one as well, so that you can follow along with both guides and get the best out of both tutorial guides as we go through them. So that's pretty much going to be it for this episode. Join my Discord server, the link is in the description, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.